Now, Washington correspondent for Spectrum News, Kevin Frey. Kevin, this is going to be a lot of difficulty for both the Speaker and the Majority Leader, who at this point haven't really worked together before either. So let's just first take their relationship. How is that shaping up? How are they working together?
Right. I mean, so like we talked about, Johnson getting elected being the easy part. Well, now we've reached the next easy part, which was getting just the resolution passed because it was so vague that everyone could get on board. When it comes to their relationship, it's blossoming in real time because these two haven't worked with each other. And quite frankly, they're both pretty new, fresh faces, John Thune in particular. Yeah. And so they are having to learn how to navigate the dynamics of Capitol Hill and their incredibly tight margins that they're both operating with, particularly Johnson, in real time. And so there's a lot of tests that lie before them.
So when you start applying that to legislation, Thune has been beneath McConnell, studying kind of at the foot of a man who very much knew how to control the Republican Senate. But that Senate has changed a lot, and you've got a lot of people who are very Trump-aligned. So when you see them starting to lay red lines like this one, on taxes, for instance, when I read the House budget bill, I thought, okay, this is going to be a tax extension for maybe 7, 8, 10, probably not 10 years, because they're needing to keep costs down to placate their rightmost flank. But when you see that red line, they have problems before they've even really begun.
Right, because, I mean, they're both operating on basically different principles. I mean, the bills are just dynamically rather different, and we should stress it's frameworks, not actual legislation. Right. But within all of that, you have one camp wanting to extend taxes almost indefinitely. You have one that's looking to it, as you've mentioned, a shorter time frame to keep prices in. You have one camp, because of the populist urge within the Republican Party that has blossomed under the Trump era, that is concerned, particularly on the Senate side, about any deep cuts to Medicaid and so forth. I'm thinking of Senator Hawley. Whereas Republicans on the House side, while they will deny that they are going to hurt Medicaid recipients, the math just does not, to coin a phrase, math. And so they're going to have to either add different restrictions to Medicaid, or they're going to have to deeply dive into it unless they take back on their, claim that they're not going to touch Medicare, which Trump doesn't like.
Yeah, Trump has laid his own red lines on this, and he's also said, I like the House bill because it's one bill, but then he also likes parts of the Senate bill, so I think there's a lot of confusion mixed in there.
This goes back to the dynamic that with Trump, because he never really gets into the legislative weeds or says one thing or the other, it leaves leadership scrambling constantly, and there is always this outstanding fear of a repeat of what happened in December, which is obviously a different sort of bill and set of requirements, but that he or Musk sends a tweet out in the middle of the night or a post or whatever you call it at this point, and everything gets upended.
And that's exactly what we saw as they were trying to fund the government in December. Let us keep in mind also that as we talk about the budget, that's a very separate process from funding the government, which they do have to do by March 14th. We'll have you back to talk about that as it gets closer, because Congress only operates on deadlines. But having you here means we do have to talk about New York politics. And it is this really interesting confluence of a ton happening in New York politics on the ground in New York. And then also you've got the two highest ranking Democratic leaders are New Yorkers. You talked to Hakeem Jeffries. What did he say? What didn't he say? What are you reading between the lines?
Yeah, I mean, so there's like chaos on multiple fronts. You've got a president whose New York is his hometown, and he is throwing his weight around in a way that he did not 8 years ago, arguably to the same degree. Yes, he messed around with tax extensions or tax limits. Yes, he messed around with the tunnel under the Hudson River that obviously keeps Amtrak at a bottleneck. But at the same time, not really touching it. He moved to Florida, for goodness sake.
Correct.
At the same time, he's now...
Very New Yorker of him.
Exactly. He's throwing his weight around in congestion pricing and other things. On top of that, and any sort of grievances that he's driving when it comes to kind of messing around in New York and wanting to be the king of New York, to quote the meme, you also have, as you mentioned, Senator, he wouldn't want me to say that, Senator Chuck Schumer, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, top two Democrats in the House and Senate, respectively, and they are now having to navigate how to be in the minority, whether or not they're being aggressive enough, and, oh, yes, throw in the dynamics of upcoming governor's race that is on pins and needles because of Governor Hochul's ratings, and then also this new mayor's race that is emerging in a peak of chaos because of Mayor Eric Adams getting knocked around by the DOJ effectively, and then this idea of Andrew Cuomo. So when I asked Congressman Jeffries about the idea of Andrew Cuomo getting involved in the mayor's race, which is a very distinct possibility within the next week or so, he basically did not comment, which is Jeffrey's way of kind of avoiding the topic, but at the same time saying a lot by not saying no, shall we say. He basically said, it's my voters in my district in Brooklyn, which, keep in mind, predominantly black voters.
Yep.
They have liked Cuomo historically. They might be interested in him. So he's definitely keeping his options open, especially as Cuomo's polling is pretty well.
And he's so good at that because I remember, and you and I were talking during the break, he still hasn't called for Adams to resign either.
Correct. And he's very key to, I mean, he chooses his words far better than I do, very distinctly.
Yeah.
And so he will use phrases like, for example, with Eric Adams, early on, he kept saying that it's going to be up to the voters to decide. But then he would add an addendum being like, perhaps decisively. And it's like, so Congressman Jeffries, you are showing your hand as to where you think this is heading, but he won't outright say he should go away.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember the definitive statement he gave to me back in the fall before the election. He said, I don't think he should resign. So at least he laid the marker there, but still a lot of questions that come from answers like that. Kevin Frey, covering it all from New York to D.C. and everywhere in between. My friend, thank you, as always.
Pleasure.